Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am going to be speaking with an amazing woman named Amber. When Amber got pregnant, she believed that her life was no longer her own. When her husband cheated on her with a friend, she was at an all-time low. Amber had a choice to make to continue to play the role of a victim of her life, girl, I get it, or to take back her power. Amber is here today to share her steps to regaining your power and recognizing your emotions in order to create awareness of who you are and the potential you hold. Welcome, Amber.
Hello, thank you for having me. That's a wonderful introduction, Sabrina. It's beautiful. Thank you. I love that.
Of course. Thank you. And I want to thank you so much for being here and hanging out and taking some time out of your day to share some of your story in order to inspire and uplift other individuals who are out there going through some stuff.
Absolutely. No, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. As always, I love to come and talk to you.
Thank you.
And you know, I love to share my story. So absolutely. Thank you.
That's awesome. Well, I would love to just kind of start out just so we know kind of who you are and your background. If you don't mind just taking, a handful of minutes to kind of take us through your journey that you're going to be sharing today and, what it kind of looked like in the past, all the way up into where you are today. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you. So I'm going to start at the beginning because where else do you start? So 2014, and I fell pregnant, or no, it would have been 2013 that I fell pregnant. My son was born in 2014. At this point in my life, I was living in Egypt, which is absolutely beautiful, but far away from home. I didn't really know very many people, and I'd not long been married either. So when my son was born, I was thrown into quite an unusual world. I didn't have anyone around me that had small children. My family were all back in the UK, and my husband worked most of his time 6 weeks away from home at a time because he worked on liveaboard boats. And so I'd gone from being this person with a relative, as a lot of us do as mothers, not having responsibility for anyone else, living the life in the way that we want to live, to essentially recognizing and realizing that, oh my gosh, there's this little person, and every single decision I make about my life and what I do affects them, right? Yeah. And that threw me into an incredibly wild state of, I can't do anything for myself. So I held this belief for a really long time, and it stemmed from way back, but I just didn't know it at the time. I didn't know I was holding on to this belief. Obviously, all of this is with like retrospective view. Yeah. But essentially, I held this belief that my life, as I knew it, was over. I couldn't pursue my dreams. I couldn't pursue my passions. It was now about my child and their needs and their life. And as a result, I ended up spiraling into a complete 10 months of utter self-neglect. So I was not even showering, eating, sleeping, to the point, it was quite quite dramatic. There was a point where I had like mats in my hair. I always go back to this story, but I had mats in my hair because I hadn't even managed to like shower and wash my hair for multiple days on end. And it was affecting my mental health. So it wasn't just physical care, but it was affecting the way that I felt. I was depressed, I was low, and I was really anxious. And that was the pinnacle point for me, because it got to a point where I couldn't leave the house by myself. I couldn't leave the apartment because I was terrified in my mind of all of these things that could happen. And I just became really trapped and isolated. So that's kind of like where my story begins, because it was a good portion of my early motherhood that I feel I almost robbed myself of those experiences, because I could see other people through social media, friends that had children back home that were doing all of this amazing stuff, taking their kids to soft play, going to these adventures with their partners and friends and family. And I was just in an apartment all day by myself, right? And I blamed people. So I know that I mentioned to you previously, Sabrina, about this victim position, this place of victimhood that we place ourselves in. So this was the first time I'd experienced that. And I'd essentially placed myself in this point of, the world is doing this to me, society does this to me, motherhood has diminished my experience of life, my husband is never around, so it's all his fault, poor guy. At the time, it's all your fault, it's all your fault. Like I was putting it on the situation, external circumstances, and not recognizing that I had a role to play. And it was one day I was looking at something else again through social media, because that was my view out into the world at the time. And I was like, why are they able to do this and not me? And that question just prompted this, oh, hold on a second. The common denominator isn't society. The common denominator isn't my husband or any of these other things. The common denominator in this situation is me. And I've made these decisions and choices. And I knew at that point that something within inside me, something just kind of lit up, and it was just a moment of, oh, hold on a second. I'm in control of my life. That's like, I can change this. Nobody else has decided this for me. I chose this. I decided this. It wasn't an overnight thing, but that instant started a journey of me figuring out how I could overcome the anxiety that I had. How could I start creating a community around me that I didn't have and that I longed for, and all of these other things. So I did. I found EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping, and I started using that, and that helped me get out of the house, and it became a process of just venturing further and further. It helped me to talk to more people, to bring people into my community circle, and I started living a life that I was truly living and enjoying. And obviously that benefited my son as well, because he was getting more experiences and he wasn't trapped inside the house. So it was beautiful all round. But then, so I'm living this life. I managed to open 2 businesses. I moved into my dream villa as a result of all of these changes that I'd managed to make. I had a beautiful community of friends that were really supportive. And I just really designed my life in a way that made me feel good about living. Fast forward a few years after, and feel free to stop me at any time, Sabrina, if you have any questions. I'm just ranting on here. But fast forward a few years later, and at this point, I'd had my second child, and little did I know I was pregnant with my third, but I didn't actually know that at the time.
Wow.
And I discovered that my husband had essentially committed adultery with somebody that we knew very well. I'd been introduced to her. She had played with my children, looked after my children. She was very much a part of our lives. And they had held this lie for 3 years. So for 3 years, they'd been married behind my back. And it was devastating. It completely tore me apart, and it threw me straight back into the position of feeling like this is being done to me. And I truly believe now that nothing's ever done to us, but at that time it really was as if I had been manipulated, and I had been manipulated and lied to in many ways. So that's not far from the truth, but it was heart-wrenching, and it threw me back into a deep state of depression. And it led to, I tried to stick around for months. I was like, ooh, maybe we can make this work. I now know the truth. There's ways around this. Maybe we can. And So I'm Muslim and my husband's Muslim, and having a second wife isn't necessarily, it's considered part of our faith as okay, but it should be done with open trust. Everyone should be involved. We know about it. There's boundaries that are set, and they hadn't been put in place. And so I was like, well, let's maybe if we put that in place now, then I can be okay with this. Like, now I know this person's been in our life. She's a very nice person. Maybe we can. And I just talked myself round into going, yeah, maybe we can make this work, maybe, which is crazy now when I look back at it, because I was like, how is this ever going to work? It's been built on a foundation of lies from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But at the time I tried, so I stuck around for months, and as a result of trying to bend myself and convince myself that I was okay with it, it was okay, I really started to break down as a person, and I went back and I reverted into that not eating. I'm not good enough. I must clean the house thoroughly from top to bottom, and I must make sure meals are on the table to be the best wife ever. And
Wow.
in that process, my husband pulled away from me even further. So he stopped coming home more frequently. He wasn't turning up for the kids when he said he'd be there. Like, he saw it as a free pass to not be available to us anymore.
Wow.
And so there's a whole lot that goes around that, but that's kind of where I found myself, and I got thrown back into this position of all of this stuff's being done to me, and I spent months under duvets crying on the phone to friends complaining. And I was like, eventually I got to breaking point, to the point where it was either take my own life because I feel that bad, or do something about this situation. And I chose to do something about this situation and go back to the tools that I'd already gained all those years ago. And that's why I always start at that part of that journey, because it was the tools that I learned during my period of anxiety and depression back when I was a first time mum, to bring that into this situation and realize that, okay, it's time to take back my power. It's time to take back control. And so I did. I booked a plane ticket, and I told my husband, that's it, I'm leaving, we're taking the kids, I'm going back to the UK. I can't stay in Egypt because there's just too much. It's too much for me. Even if we move out, even if we break up, I can't be here right now because my mental health won't allow me. And
he was okay with that?
I mean, I don't think he was completely okay with that, but he didn't put up a fight. He drove us to the airport, he let me go, and I think he knew by this point, because of the place that I was at emotionally and mentally, that it was affecting our children. And he also knew that he couldn't care for the children by himself either. So it was kind of, and even to this day, he's still, you'll come back, you'll be back one time. I get those messages, I love you, and you'll return, and everything will be better, you'll see. Which now I kind of laugh at. At the time I was like, I just want to be free, I want to get away, leave me alone, like, let me be. But yeah, so he wasn't okay with it, but he knew how far I was, and he's not completely inhuman, you know. He is still a human. He still knows that people have their limits, and he could see at that point that I was at my breaking point.
Yeah. When you mentioned that your husband, the situation that you were in with your husband, wasn't done to you. I understand the concept of that. However, to those listening that might not understand or that get it, but like, how do you do that? Can you break that down for us a little bit? Like, when you're in that situation, how do you view that in a more positive light so that it's not like, you know, this is being done to me? How do you kind of pull yourself out of that mentally? And now looking back, what would you recommend?
So for me, I mean, in the moment, believe me, I did not, like, it was an incredibly difficult thing to separate what was happening. What I tell my clients to do, and what I look back objectively, and the way that I managed to do that was separating myself from the situation. So remembering that what's happening is happening. It's an occurrence outside of us, right? And the way we choose to respond to it, the way we feel about it, our emotional reaction is a choice. It is something we control. That's within inside of us. Nobody else has responsibility over how we feel, over how we think, over how we perceive things to be. That's within our power. The situation itself, I can't control. I can't control the other people inside that situation, but I can control my reactions. I can control how I choose to react to that situation, how I choose to view that situation, and in turn, that changes how I feel about that situation. So, for example, at this point of time, these two people have come together and gone behind my back, and there's been a lot of stories and a lot of incidents and a lot of stuff built up around this. And I could choose to sit there saying, but they've lied to me.
Yeah.
Or I could say, they see them as people, as humans, that actually, if I try and gain their perspective on the situation, perhaps they were afraid to hurt me. You know, we'd known each other for 3 years at this stage, and I'd been married to my husband for 3 years. Maybe they were fearful that, you know, there's lots of things. I will never know what their perspective was unless they are openly willing to discuss it. Okay. Yeah. But I do know that most humans operate from a point of, how do you make your decisions? How is it going to affect me? You know, what am I going to get out of this? You know, we are very self-centered in many ways. As much as we don't like to think we are we're here designed, our subconscious is designed to protect us, right? Mm-hmm. Us as individuals. So the choices other people make aren't usually to hurt me, they're to gain something for themselves as well. Is that,
yeah,
you're making sense here?
Yeah.
So it wasn't that they went purposefully out of their way, we're going to get married to spite me. It was to gain something for themselves.
Yeah.
And so understanding that their choices weren't great, I don't agree with them. It hurts. Absolutely, it hurts. But that they weren't actively trying to do something directly to me, as opposed to that, more as they were trying to gain something from themselves. That's the only way I can put this, is that it wasn't done directly to me. They were trying to gain something outside of this from themselves, and I have a choice of how I react to that. So I can sit in that victimhood, I can sit in that blame state, but that doesn't serve me.
Yeah.
And someone says to me, how can you forgive him? You talk to him so openly, so freely now. And it's been a process to get to that point, but forgiveness wasn't really about him. Forgiveness has never been about the other person. The forgiveness is always about you, because until I was able to forgive, I couldn't move on. It's like that saying, whereas you drink poison, if you keep drinking the poison, the forgiveness, so hate, resentment, the other person doesn't suffer when you have feelings of upset, hurt, rage. Sorry, I know there's a mic around, I keep patting it. Upset, rage, hurt. It's not the other person. It wasn't him that was hurting. It wasn't him that was affected by that. It was me. I was drinking the poison over and over again. So as soon as I was able to forgive, it meant that I could move on with my life. I could move forward. I could have power back. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I like the fact that you are stating that it's okay to be sad or upset or frustrated, along with at the same time, because we are capable of doing that. We are capable of being frustrated at a situation and then at the same time understanding the situation for what it is. So I like that you're putting it that way. You know, you're going to be, most people, unless you just have an awful marriage, are going to be upset or feel a certain way. And that's fine. But at the same time, you know, you can pull yourself out of that and, start to kind of have some empathy for the situation or for the people involved, because we're all human. I think that that's great.
Yeah. And with that, we're meant to feel. I'd be really concerned if I came across somebody that was going through something as big as that and there was zero emotion
Good point
around it at all. That could mean a lot of things, and that some people do end up to that point where they've just gotten almost an empty feeling about the situation because it's hurt so much that you just close it off.
Yeah.
And for me, that's more worrying than somebody who feels their feelings and then can rationalize the situation or logically look at the situation objectively. And it's about accepting. So what I found really, really helped me, and this is why I love the EFT process as well, is that the first part of emotional freedom technique, or tapping, because some people might know it as tapping, is that naming of the emotion. What on earth am I feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? How does this show up for me? And talk about it. What are you feeling? If it's pure rage, talk about that pure rage that you're feeling. Accept it, own it as yours, rather than trying to stifle it, shove it down, or somehow hold that emotion outside of yourself. It's yours, and you're feeling it, and you can own that emotion, but recognize from there that that's not what you want to feel. Because in my first, going back to the period of anxiety and depression as a mother, as a first-time mother, that first period lasted for such a prolonged period of time because I didn't give myself really any space to think about how I wanted to feel. I was so in those feelings that they seemed outside of me and they seemed out of my control that I didn't even think there was an option to feel anything but what I was feeling.
Yeah.
So when we start using techniques such as EFT, or when we just start recognizing that our feelings are our own and we're in control of them, we can take ownership of whatever we're feeling, feel that hurt, feel that pain, feel the anger, feel the sadness, the frustration, and then make a conscious choice to decide what you wish you could feel instead, and make that transformation. How am I going to feel that? How do I want to feel, and how can I feel that?
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's
great.
So yeah, when you're in that situation, feel the feelings. Let yourself feel the feelings. It's human. They're there to be felt.
Definitely. As far as your journey goes and all of the things that you've gone through up until this point today, right now, this minute, what would you say is the biggest challenge you've ever gone through? And then what did you learn from that challenge?
The biggest challenge for me was coming back to the UK and returning. So when I left the UK, it was because I didn't want to live here anymore. I was done with living in the UK. There was, I'd spent most of my childhood dreaming about where I could go that was exotic and sunny and all of these things. And so I'd finally done that. Once I'd reached Egypt, it was like, I've made the dream happen. I've got it out. So to come back to this place of perceived safety because it was familiar to me, and to a place where I had family and I knew I'd have support. But on the flip side of that, it felt like a failure. It felt like I had just gone full circle and I'd gotten the dream and then I had it taken away and I just failed. I failed to live outside of the UK. I'd failed to live, which isn't true. I'd made it, right? But at the time it felt like, here I am again, back at home. I moved in with my grandmother, which is where I'd lived as a teenager. And I was like, goodness, like I'm right back at square one. This is the biggest, and that was the biggest challenge for me mentally, was to recognize that this wasn't going backwards and it wasn't a failure. And that took a lot of mental energy, because if any of you have ever been in that space where that headspace where you feel like you've failed, you also start to doubt yourself. You begin to lack confidence that you can do anything ever again because you'll just fail at that. Yeah. Well, at least that was my thought process, was like, oh, well, what do I do now? This is it. This is the end of the road. Like, that's it, I failed. Whereas actually the truth was, it was an opportunity for a whole new story, a whole new chapter to open up for me. And it was the starting point of something. It wasn't the end. And that overcoming that again took me back to using the personal development stuff that I'd learned previously. But that was absolutely my biggest challenge, because it was no longer these people. So I'm saying, oh, accept your feelings and accept that you have a part to play and a role to play in the situation that's panned out in front of you, right? But when I then came home and I've accepted the feelings, and I'm the one who's failed, I'm the one who's back in the beginning, and suddenly that puts you back into a place of self-blame, a lack of self-worth, a lack of belief in yourself. And once you start turning the camera on yourself in that negative light, you start to lack that feeling of love, that feeling of appreciation, that feeling of worth. And that can be a really hard pit to get out of. Because whereas you can distance yourself from other people, so I created that distance between myself and my husband or ex-husband, and created that distance between the situation there, I can't create distance between myself. And this is why self-love and acceptance is so important, because we can't get away from ourselves. You know, we're in this body, we can't get away from ourselves.
Definitely.
So yeah, for me, that's the biggest challenge, just learning to love and accept myself despite how at the time I felt that I had failed.
Definitely. Do you, or when did you yourself get involved in self-development? It seems like you kind of fell into it fairly early. Was this pre-divorce or?
This was pre everything.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So how old were you? How did that happen?
I was about 19 when I was first introduced to personal development, and I entered the work world. So when I left school, I went straight into insurance sales, believe it or not. And as part of that, I was introduced to goal setting, like basic level of self-development. So just goal setting and targets, and, you know, making sure that there was a bigger dream behind the goal. So it wasn't that I want to make 3 sales this month, it's that I want this money so that I can do something really beautiful and grand with. Yeah. So that was my first step into the personal development world. And then a few years after that, I was introduced to the concept of law of attraction by, again, my sensei. So I trained to be a karate instructor, but as part of this company, as we train, we also sell memberships to the karate center. So we get free training as sales reps, and then we go on to run our own dojos within our community. Wow. And so my sensei at the time basically introduced us to the law of attraction, and he gave me this whole new opening to the world as a young woman who had lived a life being brought up believing that, you know, only wealthy people get to do the things that they want to do, and we have to work hard for absolutely everything, to then just be told, well, actually, you just have a dream. What do you want in life? And desire it and work towards it and focus on it, and you can have that. I was like, wow, you're telling me as a young adult walking into the world, I can have whatever I want? Brilliant, I'll take that. So from there, I started attending personal development seminars. I attended conferences. I attended all sorts of weird and wonderful things as I just delved into this world of, of personal growth, of realizing that who I wasn't predetermined, because I just assumed that I was me, and me is me, and me is me for life, and that beyond educational knowledge, I couldn't really change aspects of myself. I couldn't change my personality or grow as an individual. I couldn't become emotionally more aware. Emotional intelligence wasn't even on my radar then. So it was a beautiful world. But I didn't really use any of that stuff. So I read about it, I learned about it, I attended conferences because it was interesting, but I didn't really understand the power of putting it into practice until these events happened. And so I'm so glad that those people along my life journey at that stage gave me these little introductions, little hints. My first experience of EFT was way before my son was born. It was at one of these conferences. And at the time, I thought this lady was crazy. She stood up on stage, and I don't even remember. All I remember was her saying, you know, follow along with me and tap and repeat after me. And there was just like this audience around me, and just a huge mix of reactions. One, you know, someone sitting next to me was just looking at me going like, I don't know, I'm not tapping. This woman's mad. Like, what is this? What is she trying to do? Other people like really tapping along and really involved and looking like they were getting so much from it. And I was like, I have no idea what's going on. So I just did it and forgot about it. By the time the conference was over, I was like, completely got from my mind. And it was only when I was looking into ways to overcome anxiety that I saw EFT mentioned in an article. And then a friend again mentioned to me, have you tried tapping? And I was like, I remember this lady from this conference doing tapping. That's my only experience. I need to go and find out what this is and how it works and why it works.
Wow.
So if I hadn't have had that experience, it might have taken me longer to get here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Who knows?
Isn't it crazy?
It is. And that's what I'd like to remind people, that if you have a dream or a desire, some form of ambition that you're sitting on and perhaps believing that it's not possible for you right now, or putting off, or there's a lot of reasons why you're not actually pursuing that yet, I just want to remind people that you don't know that if you take that one step, that one foot through the door, the one little action, not only how that's going to impact your life and how you're going to go on to achieve success, which is beautiful, but how big of an impact you can have on somebody else's life. I'm pretty sure the person who taught me about goal setting back in our sales training had no idea that I'd go on to use that in my coaching practice. I'd go on to use that to pull me out of depression and anxiety. Like, they couldn't have had an idea because they didn't know I was going to go through that stuff.
Yeah.
And what you do has that impact. It has that ripple effect upon other people too. And so I just think that's really a beautiful thing to remember, that you can have a powerful, powerful impact with just a really small action, a small decision that you make, a small bit of knowledge that you share with someone, a bit of wisdom that you share with someone. It's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. And that's why, you know, even just sharing your story, because, you know, listening to a story here, for instance, on this podcast might not make a knee-jerk pivot. However, it could be a little step up where they listen to one more, and then maybe listen to one more over the duration of maybe a year or two. And it's the combination of those 2 or 3 or 4 things that actually get them to take a step. You know, which is why it's important to speak, to educate, to tell stories in order to enlighten, you know, other people on a possible different way of doing life. There's lots of different ways of doing it, you know?
Absolutely.
And a lot of times the way that our parents taught us is not congruent with what we authentically need. Go ahead.
It's really absolutely true. And going back to the parents thing, it might have worked for them. Yeah. Those beliefs that they're holding on to, or that they've passed down to you, or that you've seen and experienced and you're replicating in your own life, may have served them, probably did serve them at some point in their own lives. And it got them here safely to the point that they're at in their life today. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's true for you, that you have to hold on to it, or you have to do life in that way if it's not serving you.
100.
And there's a complete power in recognizing that this is a pattern that you're repeating and you're not really sure why you keep repeating it. So even with my husband and the situation that happened there, and the unfaithfulness and the lack of trust, boy, this isn't the first time this has shown up in my life. Some of my very first relationships had ended in very similar ways, with a lot of distrust or a lot of hurt, or various like relationships during my teenage years and into my early adolescence. I can see how that pattern kept evolving, and I can also see my part to play in that, how I not only responded to that, but how perhaps some of my behaviors may have led to that along the way. That doesn't excuse what they did. I can recognize that I had a role to play in that, that's things I've done along my life, and this is not placing blame either. This is just saying, oh, this is a pattern of behavior for me. Is this pattern serving me? Do I keep falling back to this place? Just like I kept falling back to this place of feeling victimized. And feeling victimized, I recently, so very, very recently, Sabrina, I did a hypnosis regression. It was just last week. And in this regression, I went back to an event that I had completely blocked out of my memory. I didn't recall it. I recall it now, but I didn't recall it then, prior to going into this regression. And afterwards, I regressed to a state of needing affection, which I'd spent a long time in my childhood needing to seek affection from people. Like it wasn't something that I was getting where I needed to get it from, so I was seeking it in really destructive ways. But what's interesting is that when I received the affection, when I received the compliments, when I received that, I'd then reject it all. It's like, I need to hear it. But actually, I didn't really believe this, so I'm gonna like kind of push it away. And so after this regression, although I haven't felt like that for a really long time, this regression took me back to a state of, for like a couple of days, of just needing people to love on me. Like, I need you to love on me. Just tell me how great I am. Like, I'm reverting back to that pattern of behavior. But now, with the insights that I have, I was able to go, hold on, Amber, you're sitting in this pattern. Like, why are you suddenly back here? This is a very familiar feeling. How many times has this showed up in different parts of your life? And I'm happy to like share that openly with you guys, just to let you know that we're like, none of us who have been through events and overcome them are in any way this perfect molded person now in my life. Like, I still revert to old patterns of behavior. I still have things that show up and I go, oh yeah, that's not serving me anymore. Mm-hmm. It served a purpose once, but now this is just becoming actually quite destructive in my life. And so once you're able to recognize those patterns and where they originate from, does it stem from your parents? Is it an experience in your childhood, or whatever it might be for you? You can then start to understand on a conscious and subconscious level where actually this isn't protecting me anymore. It isn't serving the purpose that it once served me, or maybe it never served a purpose in the first place, and it's a belief that you just somehow took on board as your own. And then you can start to realize that you can actually begin to let that go. You can begin to do the healing that you need to do. So there was definitely some deep healing work that I've been working on over the past few days to get to the root of that need for affection due to a lack of an affection, right?
Totally.
And I needed to heal from that. So there may be patterns that are showing up for you. If you are going through anything similar to what I went through, anybody listening to this, recognize that if this is a recurring pattern, doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
You just because it keeps showing up for you doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And there may be a program of pattern behavior program inside your subconscious that's showing up around this behavior because, and here's the beautiful thing, because it wants you to address it. It wants you to heal from it. When you start looking at it as an opportunity as opposed to a fault or something that needs fixing. Someone said to me, oh, there's always limiting beliefs. There's always limiting beliefs to be reframed. There's always limiting emotions, and there's just so much work to be done. And I was like, it's not work. It's beautiful. It's a journey. It's healing. It's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
And so we have a choice at how we look at that.
Definitely. Yeah. When you think of the challenges that you've gone through in your life and the steps that you take to go from maybe a darker place or a challenge to a more healthy mindset, because we all go through challenges. We all,
Right.
it doesn't matter. Just because we know all the things doesn't mean that stuff isn't happening to us.
Absolutely.
So what I'd like to do is to kind of pick your brain a little bit on what you yourself do, because we all do it differently. And maybe if what some people watching right now isn't working for them, maybe they can pull from, some things that you do. So is there like a, like a 1, 2, 3 step process or something that you can kind of think of that you kind of go in and out of when you're going ups and downs through the challenges in your life?
So I'd say that there is definitely a process to it, and your very first step is acknowledgement.
Ooh.
Honestly, acknowledging where you are, what is the situation. I find journaling really helps me with this, or as I've spoken to a couple of my clients about, if you don't like writing stuff down, and if that's difficult for you in any way, shape, or form, then record yourself just speaking it out loud. You don't ever have to listen to it back, but it's just that act of taking the time to say, this is what's happening. So where am I? What am I doing? Check in with yourself. How do I feel? Why do I feel that way? Is there somebody that's involved in this situation? How do I feel towards them? Get it all out. Like, just spend some time getting it out onto paper, onto a recording, in any way, shape, or form, but allow yourself the space to do that. Because what often happens is that, and I've done this myself, I'm feeling stuff and I'm still trying to get through the day. I'm still trying to make everything else happen because life has to go on, and there's children to care for, and there's a home to keep, and there's a job to show up for, or whatever it may be, or even just, I just need to sleep. I just want to be in my bed and I just want to sleep. Giving yourself that dedicated time and space to really acknowledge it instead of ignoring it and trying to battle against it. Just let it come in. And yes, that might mean that you cry. And yes, temporarily, it might mean that you feel worse because you're talking about it and you're bringing it all up to the surface, but that's part of the process. Until we learn to accept and acknowledge and feel what we feel, we can't let it go. Once you've done that, you'll have a better understanding of what the situation, like, what is this overall situation? What is the big picture, right? You're building that picture for yourself, even though you already know. But sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we don't know why we've got ourselves into this hole. Sometimes things look really bleak, and we're on a conscious level, you're like, well, it's actually not that bad, but we still feel really bad. So if you're in that situation as well, sometimes writing it out gives you insight. It's like, oh, that's what I'm feeling. That's why I'm feeling it. It's not even anything to do with this situation. It's coming from like 10 years ago. Oh my gosh. Like, I'm still holding on to that. I didn't realize. Great. Yeah. Okay, now I can deal with that. So you've got the knowledge. Once you've got the knowledge, seek advice, seek help, seek support. And I don't necessarily mean from a professional. It doesn't have to be from a professional space. I mean from people.
Yeah.
We are social creatures, we're social beings, and when we feel bad, sometimes we want to isolate ourselves. Yeah. But in that very act of isolating ourselves, we narrow down our point of view, we narrow down our need for comfort, for support, we close off opportunities. So just finding someone that you trust, that you feel that able to open up to, that you can share with, and you don't even have to go into detail with this person. You can literally say, look, I am here and I feel like crap. Yeah. And I just need you to know that I feel bad. Having people that are aware, because, and for me this is key, because I didn't tell people that I wasn't going out of the house. I just was like, yeah, I'm just not coming out today. I didn't tell people that I was anxious that if I got in a taxi I'd get kidnapped and my child might get taken away. I didn't voice those things because I thought people would think I was insane. Yeah. And there's a whole level of other like fear around judgment and stuff like this. But if I had done, when I did start to voice those things, I suddenly to receive advice and help and support in the way that I needed it. Yeah. So I'm not saying you need to share with everybody. Not everybody is your person to lean on. Yep. find someone you're happy to open up with just a little bit and let them know what you're dealing with. So yeah, acknowledge, build that support network. And then for me personally, it was about finding tools to help me deal with whatever was going on. So now I don't just lean on EFT, I lean on hypnotherapy, I lean on NLP. Recognize that you don't have to stay in this state, and that there is hope and there are tools that you can use. So I think that's like in a 3-step process, that's pretty much what I do. I get it all out, I recognize where I'm at, I seek some just support, social support and help and guidance, and then I take a look at what it is I'm dealing with. So this is probably another stage you want to go in. So how are you feeling right now, and what do you want to feel instead? For me, this is like massive. If I'm just sitting in these feelings, so we've acknowledged them, we're sitting in them, great, I know what the situation is. Well, but that's not the situation I want, and that's the situation I'm faced with. So what is the situation? What is it that you want? If this isn't it, if where you are right now isn't what you want, what do you want? Spend some time, again, journal it out, talk about it, figure out what you want to feel instead.
Yeah.
And then you can start finding out how do you make that happen. The people around you in a situation, so taking my situation, I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel appreciated. I wanted to be respected, because I certainly wasn't being respected. Okay. And I knew that in that situation, I couldn't get respect or love from either of those people involved, that I had already been. And sorry, Sabrina, you were going to say something. Please do.
No, I'm fine.
I thought you were going to say something. It's okay. So I had a choice. Was I going to continue to keep myself in a situation where the opposite was true, where I was being disrespected, where I was being lied to, where I was being treated poorly? That wasn't what I wanted, yet I was staying and allowing that to happen.
Yeah. Crazy.
So recognizing what you don't want, recognize what you do want, and then take a look at where you are showing up. Where are you showing up and allowing this to be the case? It's really hard sometimes to accept responsibility, to say, well, actually, I don't have to be in this place. I don't have to be in, like, there's a choice. If it's a relationship that you want to take yourself away from, the power is within you to do that, and there is support around you to help you. If you feel unsafe for any reason, there are people that can support you in that process. I had friends that helped me in that process, because I had all sorts of fears around leaving the country. Would he let me fly out? If I book this flight, will I be able to take my children with me? And all of these things that came up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to put support in place. I was able to have those conversations. I was able to make sure that that wasn't going to be the case, but that I could only do that once I was really very fully aware of what I wanted instead, and what I was putting up with, what I was allowing for myself. So, yeah.
Definitely. I want to ask, what's the number one lesson that you've learned from life?
I am powerful. That is my number one lesson. I am powerful. And that doesn't mean I'm perfect, but it means I can do stuff. I can change things. I can move things. I really have the power within me to do pretty much anything that I can imagine myself doing.
Absolutely. Definitely.
And along with that, power doesn't mean that I do it all alone.
Oh, that's a good one.
Power doesn't, powerful people, I always think of this as superheroes. So you see Thor with his hammer, and I don't know, you've got Spider-Man over here doing his thing, Superman over here doing his thing. But they all have people they rely on. They all have families. Like in these stories, in every story, there is, a a best friend for support, a wife, or another superhero, and we the Avengers team up together. We're never alone. We don't have to be alone.
Yeah.
Okay. But it can feel like we're alone a lot of the time or some of the time. We don't have to be. So being powerful doesn't mean that you do everything alone. Being powerful means you know that you can use tools and resources to help you get there. That it comes from within, but there's help from outside too.
Definitely. I want to take a moment really fast just to recognize the individuals that are hanging out with us right now live. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hanging out with us and listening to Amber's journey and all the inspiration or thoughts that she is leaving with us today. So those of you also watching on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay so that we know where you are and we can send you out some love. I want to ask Amber, what do you do for business? What do you do for work? What do you do to help all the humans out?
So my helping hand is I'm an empowerment coach and EFT master practitioner. I essentially coach other women into their own power. So I'm really heavily focused right now on helping people, specifically mums, to pursue their dreams, goals, and ambitions, and to overcome fears, anxieties, worries that are holding them back and keeping them small in their life, and that are stopping them from confidently, and here's the key word, confidently pursuing their dreams. So knowing that they can achieve, knowing that they can succeed, knowing that they can have whatever it is they desire, big, small, giant, grand dreams, getting them to that stage where they can start taking action with a knowing that just taking those actions will get them to where they want to be.
That's great.
So that's what I do.
And then your website is right above your face area. Is that the best way people can contact you? Is your social media and stuff on there?
Yeah, they can either contact me via the website. It's going under a bit of an overhaul at the moment, which is taking longer than I wanted it to. So you can contact me via Facebook, and I can pop that under video if it's not already in the description, so we can do that. Or via email, which is just info@ambercherelle.com.
Beautiful. I think actually I did put your Facebook link in the description.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So check the description. For those of you that are looking to link up with Amber, check the description first. It should be in there. And she's also linked. So go through my stuff and you'll see her tagged in the stuff. Amber, what does success mean to you?
Success mean to me? Oh, good question. What does success mean to me? Doing the things you want to do. Being successful in life isn't a measuring, so it's not measuring yourself against what other people have achieved. For me, success is setting your own standards, your own desires, and meeting them.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just because of my personal period of time where I wasn't meeting my own needs and desires. But for me, that is success. Is knowing what you want out of life and going ahead and achieving what you want from life, not what anybody else wants.
Definitely.
So you define your own version of success. What does my own version of success look like? It looks like a life that is full of joy. No matter where I am in the world, no matter what I'm doing, it needs to be joyful. And that's what I strive for. So that is my success. As long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing, then I'm happy. That's success.
That's great. To close up, I would love for you to, speak directly to the females here that are watching. A lot of times we, as female, are humans, find ourselves in a predicament where we are living a life that is not authentic to ourselves, whether it's peer pressure from our spouse, our parents, our society, our environment. We're in jobs we don't necessarily appreciate. We're in relationships we don't necessarily appreciate. What would be one piece of advice that you would give to a female right now listening who's just feeling kind of stuck in her life?
You have choices. The people or the situations that have you feeling stuck right now are not in control.
Yeah.
You are in control. You have choices, and those choices might feel scary right now. The opposite, the things that you want, may kind of terrify you because perhaps it's unknown, perhaps it's something you haven't tried before, perhaps there's voices from other people, as Sabrina mentioned, telling you that you shouldn't do this, you couldn't do this, you can't do this. Yes, you can. If you decide that you want to, you can. You can learn anything you need to learn. You can grow in any way, shape, or form that you need to grow. You're a human with unlimited potential. You absolutely can. You just need to believe and decide.
Absolutely. I remember that was one of the first things when I first started getting into personal development that I would talk about. I'd be like, I didn't know that I had a choice. Yeah, I had no idea that I could like do it different. Isn't that weird? Like, and I consider myself a very smart person. And just recognizing that within myself, I'm like, there's so many people right now who are dealing with the same thing. They don't know that they can make a choice. That was perfect.
There's even times where I don't know that I can make a choice, even though I know. I'm sitting here telling you, you have a choice.
Yeah.
But there are times when we're so wrapped up in what's going on.
Yeah.
Our vision is narrowed. Our point of focus is just narrowed to this event at this time, at this present moment, these feelings, how I am right now. And we forget that there is a world outside of this. Like, there is a world beyond our vision, and we just start to open that up a little bit and give ourselves permission to choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's a beautiful thing when you realize that there are actually choices you're making on a daily basis, because we operate subconsciously for so much. Like, I think there's an argument whether it's 95% or 99%, but let's just put it this way: most of your actions throughout your entire day come subconsciously. You don't think about them. The choices you make, you're not thinking about on a conscious level. So
I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah,
like over 90%. Like, even if it's over 90%. Wow.
So Sigmund Freud, who was the first person to, I believe, I'm like, should you quote me on that? I'm not sure if you could quote me on that directly, but I'm pretty sure it was Sigmund Freud, who basically was the first person to look at it as if it was like an iceberg. So he believed that our conscious mind was just above the surface of the water, just like the iceberg's tip, and most of the iceberg is submerged under the water, right? So this is our subconscious. Most of our programming, most of the way that we operate as a human being, as a person on a daily basis, is done on a subconscious level. And he said it was 90% to 10%. So 90% subconscious, 10% conscious. More recent articles that I've read between 95 and 5%, 99 and 1%.
Wow.
But it's a massive part of our day that we spend in our subconscious. And it means that we're not aware that we're making these decisions and choices, down to the smallest things, like how you step out of bed in the morning. I remember, I think it's maybe The Magic by Rhonda Byrne. One of her books, in there is, she talks about, it might be The Power, but she talks about how you get out of bed in the morning, so that when you put your first foot on the floor, you think of something that you're grateful for in your life. And every step you take, to whether it's the kitchen that you go to first or the bathroom that you go to first, you consciously, every single step you take, you think about one thing in your life that you're grateful for on the way to get up. And this is how you wake up in the morning.
I love that.
And she just makes this as a suggestion of a way of breaking that pattern of waking up in the morning and feeling grouchy and rolling around and complaining that you've got to get up for work or whatever, and making yourself feel bad, actively making a choice to step out of bed thinking about the things that you're grateful for in your life. We don't realize that it's a subconscious level. I don't actively get up and think, oh, I'm going to stub my toe and feel really good for the rest of the day, and I'm just going to let that negativity snowball throughout the day. We don't think about that. Yeah. But it is a choice that we can make. We can choose to do that differently.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Definitely. I love that. What a way to close.
With choices. It's a beautiful way to close.
Yeah, definitely. That was powerful. 100%. Well, I want to thank you for hanging out and
thank you for having me
and sharing. And do you have any closing thoughts before I close?
Only that if you have any questions about anything that we've discussed today, please pop them in the comments. Like if you're watching in the replay, I'll keep an eye on them. I'm sure Sabrina's always keeping an eye on them. So if you've got anything at all that you wanted to ask, or anything that you think of as you're listening back to this, or any time in the future, just raise them, and you can always contact me via Messenger. But I think it's really good if you do have questions, if you feel comfortable to ask them publicly, because then other women get to see those responses, and they get to grow, to understand and grow with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Well, this has been so fantastic. For those of you watching live right now, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Again, if you're watching on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay so that we know that you were here, and and we can send you some love. This has been the Her Version podcast. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me and see if you can be a possible guest on this Her Version podcast. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. Until next time.